Hello, my fellow assault-type Thomas enjoyers. Now, you might have noticed that I've been on a bit of an on and off YouTube hiatus, but occasionally you see a video that is so abhorrent, so absolutely deranged, bruv, that you have to come back to talk about it. You read the title, we're watching Isaac Butterfield, and I'm not going to waste any of your time, so let's start. The video that we are going to be watching today is called Why Weak Men Are a Threat to Society. Okay, just before we start the video, I just wanted to say, because of a weird formatting issue, I've had to screen record the video off of YouTube. It's still watchable, it's still fine, but it's a bit annoying. Just forgive that, sorry.
Believe it or not, masculinity used to be pretty popular amongst men. Well, for the last 300,000 years anyway. Men have always required masculinity.
Okay, so we've started with a huge broad statement about masculinity. Now, forgive me for sounding like Matt Walsh, but what is masculinity? Because masculinity can mean a lot of things. It's like, you know, the jacked dude down at the gym. It can mean like an old guy with wisdom who, I don't know, fought in fucking Korea or something. It could mean stoically standing up for what you believe in. It could also mean being a bit of a hothead. And old Isaac over here never really gives us a definition for it, for what he believes in, so it's kinda hard to gauge what he's talking about. We'll figure out that later in the video, but for now it's like, huh?
It has allowed us to be the protector, the provider, the fighter. But now, for some reason, masculine men are seen in the same light as smoking, lead paint, and House of Cards with Kevin Spacey. It was good at the time, maybe we enjoyed it for a little bit, but now we know too much.
Okay, if my man's trying to compare Kevin Spacey with masculinity, what are we doing here? He's clearly trying to line up masculinity with, you know, smoking and leprosy for as hated as it is in society, when that's just not true. Every week on men's magazines, you see the most jacked men imaginable on there, the most masculine men. Nothing's really changed. It's very similar to how it's been for the last half century, even more. It's just that now we're a lot more accepting of men who deviate from those sort of standards, and you very quickly start to realize that that's this guy's problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, masculinity is dying, and it's leaving a lot of men, young and old, lost, without a cause in the world.
Hey, so I actually don't disagree with that too much. Men's role in the world is changing, or at least in the West, is changing quite rapidly. A lot of men who grew up in the 2000s and even the early 2010s in very traditional households are now arriving in a world and are meeting partners and are discovering things about themselves that don't align with the traditional values that they were raised with. And so you end up with a situation where, yeah, a lot of men do feel lost. You're making a great point, buddy. Let's see how you bring it home.
Every day, thousands of people shout down men who are masculine people.
Buddy, please get off Twitter. I agree that people who shout down men's issues and men in general are absolute dickheads and should be bullied off the face of the internet. The other factor that plays into this is that there's about 12 of them. The notion that there's this massive societal wave against men is absolutely ridiculous and is usually evidence that the people that are making these arguments live on the internet.
This is the crazy thing about it. We are naturally masculine. That is how our sex operates. You would never shout down a woman for being feminine, would you?
Have you ever seen, like, maybe a young boy, 12 years old, at school, lift something up for a teacher, and then that teacher will go, "Oh, good man, you're very strong." That's praising masculinity. That happens all the time in the real world, and it's in a school environment. So this notion that everyday masculinity is under attack is just so fucking laughable, dude. And no, people don't usually criticize girls for their femininity.
Most women will sit there and be proud, and they love their femininity, but if a dude says the same thing, all of a sudden they're a horrible piece of shit, and that is not fair in the slightest.
The woke hippie SJWs aren't gonna like this, but hey, I like being a man. I like being taller than most other people. But I don't share this weird blood oath with my characteristic. Like, I don't think women sit up and are super proud of their femininity. It also kind of goes against these people's stereotypes of feminism as this movement to defeminize women? Like, which one is it? Are they trying to be too feminine, or are they trying to be too masculine? Pick one.
In the past decade, maybe over the past 2 decades, we have seen a steep decline in the levels of masculinity within the male population of the Western world.
And there you go. If you didn't need more evidence that this wasn't entirely an aesthetic thing to these people, when he's talking about men that he doesn't find masculine or desirable, he shows photos of men in dresses and makeup. Like, I swear to God, dude, you could introduce this guy to the most masculine man. I'm talking the most stoic, authoritative man you could ever imagine. But if he had a bit of eyeliner on, nah, it's all over. He's not masculine, he's a femboy.
We are in the midst of an epidemic of weak men, and the outcome may be horrifying. And let me just clarify all this. All those things about being a protector and bravery and all that shit, it doesn't mean women can't do it. But on average, men are built to do that. That's why we're bigger, we're stronger, faster, all that shit, more aggressive, so that we can be the ones who do the shit jobs.
So I'm just going to point something out here. This guy claims that we're getting the short end of the stick, that we suck, that, you know, we've gotten too lazy, but he wants to send us back to a time where we were essentially expendable commodities that just got thrown at a problem until it was solved. Little food for thought there. It's
not just the physicality of male beings that shows us that, you know, this is built into us. It's also the structure of our DNA. It is different. We are different to females, to the point where a study that was conducted showed that if you are a man who has a traumatic brain injury, you are more likely to reach certain levels of recovery in comparison to a female who has the same injury. And that is because men on average are more motivated. They don't take no for an answer. They want to try and reach these goals.
So I immediately smelt some wishy-washy friendship is magic bullshit with all of this. And just from a cursory glance of Google, I couldn't find the direct study that Isaac was referencing, but the evidence of this is inconclusive at best. Some injuries women tend to recover faster than men, others it's the other way around. Yeah, so I don't really believe in that at all. And even if that is the case, it's not because men have some innate, like, problem-solving measure. It's much more likely that it's due to the fact that we have more of a certain hormone or something like that.
Right now, today, there is not another group of people that is more hated for the color of their skin, their gender, and their sexual preference than straight white men. And I know that a lot of people hear that and they switch off straight away, but it is true.
You heard it here first, folks. The Uyghur genocide? Pfft, get that shit out of here. What's going on in Palestine? Nah, doesn't even matter, dude. The biggest plight on earth faced by anyone is that of the straight white man. Now, I'm not here to deny that straight white men don't have problems. They absolutely do. But they do not face the same systemic issues that other minorities do. That's just a fact.
What are straight white men good for?
Not a lot.
Do you think straight white men are important?
No.
We're utter fucking trash.
I think they're good for in society.
If they give them their bank card, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I won't deny that clip was pretty terrible, and unfortunately the second guy does look a bit like me before I cut my hair, but, you know. I will say that this leads into a larger problem of, like, why are you trusting a clip channel for your opinions? It's the general public. Of course they're gonna have terrible opinions. We voted for Scott Morrison in 2019. What do you expect? I think if you put these people in front of a straight white guy, they probably wouldn't really care. They just treat him like everyone else, which isn't that how it's supposed to be? Still, you shouldn't talk about anyone like this, obviously.
Have that conversation right there, or ask questions about any other type of human being, and you will be attacked for racism, sexism, all that shit. Right? You'll just be attacked.
As they should be if they do that. And yes, you've pointed out a double standard. We shouldn't talk about men that way. But the thing is, there isn't the same systemic drive behind the way we talk about men that there is the way we talk about, you know, black people or gay people or trans people or whatever.
But it's absolutely fine to demonize and even make careers of demonizing straight white men. Why? Because masculinity is a terrible problem, a terrible plight across humanity. And I understand where that's coming from, because people right now associate the word masculinity with the phrase toxic masculinity. To a lot of people, they mean exactly the same thing. Arrogance, violence, the inability to show any introspection, believing that they're better than everybody else and believing that they're better than women. These are examples of toxic masculinity, and they are real. Or are they? Are they just traits of really shit people?
I think you're forgetting that, like, another trait of toxic masculinity are men being forced to stuff up their feelings and not complain about anything. A huge part of, like, toxic masculinity, as it's called, isn't just men doing bad things to other people. It's really self-destructive behavior that men do in general. I hate to go all BreadTube video essay, that's really not what I want my content to be, but that's what toxic masculinity is. It is not necessarily just man screams loudly. It's a pro-guy phrase. It's just meant to tell men that it's okay if you cry occasionally over something that's worth it, you know?
I really argue the point that masculinity is necessary, and it has always been necessary, and it will always be necessary, and in a world without it, society will be brought to its knees.
There is no evidence of this, and Isaac again continues to fail to even tell us what masculinity is, so it's just like, I'm not fucking repeating myself. By this guy's logic, a bunch of butch lesbians could run the world, because, I mean, they're stereotypically manly, I guess. They just don't have a dick. Something tells me he wouldn't like that, though. He then includes this clip from this bumfuck nowhere Instagram page of students talking about bad experiences they had with masculinity in their school, and then tries to spin this as some form of dying masculinity.
I don't know if, like, you'll include this, but I remember boys, would like wait for the female teachers to walk up the stairs at school and get their phones out and film up their dresses.
I won't dwell on this video too much. It goes for a long time, but it sounds like these three young guys, all from private schools, and they just sound like they got out of the surf. It's a 14-minute video from a page called Teach Us Consent, and they basically talk about all the things that boys do in school that are just horrifying and terrible and bad. And a lot of them are quite bad, but you never hear, this is what's really quite strange, you never hear one of them say, well, you know, yeah, that was one dude who did that, or two guys did that, and they're assholes, and no one liked them. They just blame every single person there with the penis.
Isaac, buddy, he was making an observation. If he didn't specify that not that many guys were doing it, it's probably because it was a bit of a prevalent issue. I mean, dude, I've seen this before. It happens, and it's a bit of a problem. Now, I don't think this is innate to men. I think if we socialized ourselves a lot better, then we'd have far less problems. But for the time being, we need to point shit out like this when it happens. And it's really telling that you seem very enthusiastic on pattering this stuff down.
Like, they didn't even say, no, I didn't do that. It was just a couple of bad eggs. They just label everyone with that toxic masculinity because I don't even know why. I don't understand what it achieves. If someone who is a man is going to be an arsehole and you call everyone else around him toxically masculine and say they're pieces of shit, it doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't fix the problem.
Again, no one disagrees with this, but you're strawmanning the argument. No one in a kindergarten classroom is running around and telling all the boys that they're terrible. They're just saying that they should avoid repeating behaviors of bad men. He just waffles on about this Instagram section for like another 2 minutes. He makes a semi-good point about high school caricatures, but if you want to see that, just go watch the video.
Take a look at this. Young male and anti-feminist. The Gen Z boys who hate women. Okay, do they? So anyone who is, this is what they're saying, young male and anti-feminist, they hate women. That's what you're suggesting?
Okay, let's be honest here. There is a huge overlap, almost entirely, of the anti-feminist community and raging sexists. I love to sound like Sky News, but it's just common sense.
Let's read on. Oh, hang on. Half of young men in the UK now believe that feminism has gone too far.
Just gonna point out that this article is 2 years old, might be a little bit out of date.
How did it get that bad? Now that is a post that's put out to millions of people. And the title basically suggesting that young male and anti-feminists, they're the boys who hate women. And then the next line comes down and says that half of the UK's men think that feminism's gone too far.
So just gonna point out that these polls never usually get more than about 50,000 votes, and the people that would be looking for these types of polls probably have a predetermined position. So let's be honest here, this is hardly a decent look into what the actual male zeitgeist over in Britain is.
So that means that they're anti-feminist, which must mean they hate women. You're born a man, you turn out to be a little bit masculine, you question feminism, and then all of a sudden you hate women and next Christmas you're a neo-Nazi. What the fuck?
Dude, that is so true. That's what I think all the time.
And no wonder young boys are starting to see masculinity as evil. And I think that one of the problems with all of this is every group, every gender, everything has a movement behind them. There's the Me Too movement for women. There's the Black Lives Matter movement for black people. But anyone who seems to want to support men, think Jordan Peterson.
Ah yes, the man so enamored with the advancement of masculinity that when someone found their own masculinity, he basically called them a ghoul.
Right? They just get attacked. That's just what you do. You just attack them. Even Andrew Tate, right? We all know he's a bit of a dickhead and he might have done some really dodgy stuff. But people don't even focus on that. They're not even focusing on the sex trafficking allegations. They're focusing on the fact that he tries to help masculine men.
Oh my god, dude. How the fuck does Andrew Tate help masculine men? The only men that Andrew Tate helps are fucking femboys in denial. You will also never be able to convince me that Andrew and Aiden are straight, by the way. Like, just no shot.
But anyone who doesn't attack men is seen as a men's rights activist that hates women, and that is awful. Something needs to be done, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sick of seeing young men kill themselves.
Yep, here comes the male suicide virtue signal.
Every day in Australia, there are 9 people that kill themselves, and 7 of them are men. You're telling me that there's a problem with men hurting others? No, they're hurting themselves. And you could say that toxic masculinity, you know, causes a lot of those deaths, and maybe it does a few.
This is a bit of a microcosm, but a huge part of the reason that men find themselves homeless so much more than women isn't necessarily because financially there's a massive difference. It's much more due to the fact that when women become homeless, they are far more likely to find some kind of service or even just a friendly stranger who will allow them into their home for shelter and food purposes. This is because, in our society, women are seen as innately more innocent beings in need of protection, so there are naturally far more lenient government services offered to them and charities and stuff like that. More men are on the street, which means more men are depressed, which means more men are likely to kill themselves or they're likely to be killed. We shouldn't be tearing down these services that are offered to women. We should be allowing them access for men as well. Men should have similar services. In fact, in a lot of situations, men should have the same services. I get that this is only one slice of the cake, but it's really representative of the rest of all the kinds of issues that men face. Real issues that men face.
We shouldn't break the souls of young men. We should pressure them into being great.
What do you mean by pressure? Because I think we've established that pressuring a certain group of people into a specific role doesn't usually end very well.
Men are weaker today than ever before. All right, their minds are weaker, but it's also physically. Men today can't bench press, can't squat, can't deadlift as much as the men 30, 40 years ago. That has been proven in studies.
Australia doesn't have as many industrial jobs as we used to. The same goes for the rest of the Western world. So if you really want to have a debate about socioeconomic conditions, we can, but I don't think that's why you're mad about this. You're misdiagnosing the problem in a really bad way.
So men aren't doing as much. They're not going out and doing as much. They're not living that masculine life that for someone who has testosterone pumping through their veins is not only required, is not only helpful, but it is necessary for a happy life. We're not being told to train our body, to provide for our families, to be willing to fight to the death, to protect those that we love. We're not being taught that anymore.
Great, we finally kind of have a definition for what you think masculinity is. That's great. Why does it specifically have to be muscly men that do it? Those qualities also aren't entirely exclusive to masculinity, so like, we're almost back at square one.
So men are lost. We don't have the role models we once did. Modern fathers are walking on eggshells, terrified about losing their jobs if they say anything. And if you don't have a father, then you're fucked as well. More people without fathers end up in jail, end up homeless, end up mentally ill.
Oh my god, these people have such a one-dimensional view of the world. Yeah, because the fact that these people are poor and going to jail has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that they now only have one income in their family and they likely live in a low socioeconomic area. Nothing to do with that, dude. I generally think that it's good to have two parents in the household, but I don't think that those two parents need to be the typical role model of a mum and a dad. The value of having two parents comes from the fact that you get two different perspectives at the world, and it does not matter if one's jacked and one's some effeminate trad wife.
School can be blamed as well. These young men are growing up in very feminine environments. Teachers, they're all women. This curriculum is written by women. And because of this, we see the vast majority of successful students from primary school, high school, and university, they're all women.
First of all, at least in the West, education has always been the domain of women, at least for the teaching role itself. And second of all, the reason that girls tend to do better at school than boys do is because we're more likely to encourage girls to read, to write, to be imaginative, to be creative. And so if you want boys to do better in the education system, you encourage these patterns of behavior from a younger age.
It's designed for them, and that's marvelous for them, but what about us fucking idiots? Let me say this, to finish this video. Weak men are dangerous. Look at all the school shooters. They're all weak pieces of shit.
Pieces of shit that would have a lot to agree with what you say, Isaac. Now, I'm not saying that Isaac's a white supremacist or a Klansman. No, I just think he's dumb. But he does sound a lot like Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson sometimes. Anyway, I'll wrap it up there. He goes on for the next minute and a half about how you shouldn't get drunk and stuff like that. All pretty admirable, actually. I don't have any complaints. But we'll wrap it there because that's basically it. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Have a great day. Like, subscribe, do whatever the kids do these days, and have a good one. See you later.